This is a quote from Edward Mandell House, who was an integral part of setting up the Federal Reserve. And here's what House said. Very soon, every American will be required to register their biological property in a national system designed to keep track of the people, and that will operate under the ancient system of pledging. By such methodology, we can compel people to submit to our agenda, which will affect our security as a chargeback for our fiat paper currency. Every American will be forced to register or suffer not being able to work or earn a living. They will be our chattel, and we will hold the security interest over them forever.
Hey friends, welcome back. Thank you so much for hitting play. Look, we're going to delve into an area that is outside of my wheelhouse to some extent. We have touched on it in the past with Sophia Smallstorm, and actually a hat tip to Sophia. Sophia has gotten me in touch with Anita Whitney, whose website, anticorruptionsociety.com, is a must-read. And I want to give another shout out to the Sage of Quay radio show's Mike Williams, who has interviewed Anita. Anita is a well-researched expert on the corporate contract government structure, which is what we have in the United States right now, and we're going to get into it. Guys, your republic is actually a corporation. Anita, welcome.
Well, hi. Thanks. Glad to be here.
Well, thanks so much for taking the time, and I do want to give a shout out to Mike Williams. I listened to your entire recent interview with Mike on Sage of Quay Radio, and it was gripping. You know, I have spoken with Sophia Smallstorm about this issue. You, in large part, have woken her up to the fact that the United States is a corporation, not a republic, and one wonders, Anita, if that's the way it's always been. Before we dive in, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you woke up to all of this?
Well, in 2009, while I was watching the H1N1, I started my first website, and I named it For Ohioans because I was trying to locate in the statutory code, Ohio Revised Code, any indication that during the H1N1 pandemic that they had passed any kind of rules permitting them to mandate that we all get vaccinated. Some of us during that pandemic were extremely concerned about that possibility. So having had some experience with the Ohio Revised Code as a court-appointed special advocate, I was a little bit familiar with, researching it and trying to locate public health laws, etc. At the same time, or around the same time, someone sent me a link to a video that John Harris did out of Britain called "It's an Illusion," and I listened to that, and I was quite frankly shocked because John Harris was identifying the corporate structure, and he did a good job. He got a lot of credit for that. He went on and did another video, but in that video, he said, if you don't believe me, go to Dun & Bradstreet and look up your city council or your county or whatever, and you will see they are all listed. And I thought, well, that's easy. I can do that. So I did a search on Dun & Bradstreet, and lo and behold, there they all were. Not only was my city there, my county was listed. The Ohio Department of Health was listed. The governor was listed as the executive office, state of Ohio. My school district was even listed. That's when I realized that they had even incorporated the schools. So that got me going, Sean. I had to figure out, well, he's absolutely right. They're all listed. Now, what does that mean? Anyway, what does that mean has happened to our government, and what is the significance? And that's when I really started digging into this whole question. What does it mean when the government's a corporation?
You know, you mentioned in the interview with Mike that we are governed by a system of corporate contracts, which has usurped our representative form of government. I think it's pretty clear at this point that we no longer have a truly representative form of government. It's clear to anyone paying attention that they don't care. And, you mentioned the H1N1 scare and the mandatory shots. I see so many things coming out of California, Anita, that give me so much concern, so much fear, actually. They're eliciting fear of government tyranny to the point where the tyranny in California is now overt. We see Agenda 21 policies rolling out, and no one seems in a position to stop them. We see Jerry Brown signing mandatory vaccination laws despite an outcry from the people. The people don't want this. The people don't want a state-sponsored vaccination, a state-sponsored needle shoved into their kids' bodies. But the government's saying, too damn bad, you're going to get it anyway, and if you don't, we'll put you in jail. Now he just signed another bill requiring the vaccination, the mandatory vaccination of child care providers and including child school volunteers. So the tyranny is out of control. And so it makes sense to me that that H1N1 scare woke you up. What do you make of the mandatory vaccinations? What do you make of Agenda 21? Is all of this rolling out because our government is a corporation and they're just doing the bidding of the New World Order powers, of the global powers of the United Nations?
Yes, that's pretty accurate. And yes, I've written extensively about what happened in California with SB 277. I'm not as frightened as other people because I understand the legal system that's in place. And I understand what they believe gives them the authority to force us to vaccinate our children, to force us to enroll our children in education systems that they own and control. When you understand it's a corporate structure, then you start to see more and more solutions as how we can deny contracting with them and how we can protect ourselves from them. The solutions that we will talk about are not solutions that will all of a sudden turn the whole country free from this corporate structure, but until the money system's under control, and I know you know all about that, Sean, that this is all coming from their control of the monetary system.
Right.
Because they have enough money to fund any program they want. They put unlimited funds into the Department of Health and Human Services on the Healthy People 2020 vaccination agenda. They put unlimited money in Agenda 21 projects across the country. They have unlimited money, as we know. So they fund it all. They fund whatever they want. And until that funding dries up, we're going to have to be down here on the ground figuring out ways that we don't get caught in their tar baby traps. That's how I see it. And we do have solutions, but you're right about that's what they did in California. They did pass that, and when we looked into that, we're going back to this corporate structure. I have two websites. One is actually I have more than that, but I have Parents Against Mandatory Vaccines. And on that website, we looked at this statute in California. I don't have it right in front of me, so I'm just going to kind of explain it. The SB 277. And we looked at the very first sentence in that, and the very first sentence identifies who it applies to. And Sean, it only applies to persons as a pupil. And that word person, we think it means one thing, but indeed it means something completely different in their legal corporate structure.
Right. Now,
and it doesn't mean a flesh and blood living boy or girl.
Right, you have to acquiesce, you have to agree to be part of their corporate structure. But this gets into the muddy waters of, none of us are obligated to pay taxes, it's a voluntary system. The problem is that the IRS has the guns and the enforcement. The IRS controls the courts. Look no further than Irwin Schiff, who just died in prison for standing up against this tyranny. They will make your life a living hell. And so I wonder now how people are going to be able to rebel against SB 277, and now more recently this criminal governor has signed into law SB 792. And let me just read a little bit about that for folks. Governor signs first adult vaccine mandate for preschool teachers and parent volunteers. Governor Brown signed SB 792 into law on October 11th, 2015. The first in the nation adult vaccine mandate to work or secure a business license outside of the healthcare and first responder profession is the companion bill to SB 277. These criminals are going to make people get the shots. Now, how can we not acquiesce? How can we assert our sovereignty and legally, because I think SB 792, Anita, has criminal penalties for those that don't comply, just like Irwin Schiff found himself in prison, and he died there because this criminal government doesn't care about your personal sovereignty. What do we do to rebel against this tyranny and not end up in jail?
Well, that's going to be the challenge, and it's always been the challenge. There are people who have been examining this for 20, 30 years, and I'm fortunate in that I have been reading all their material, and I'm in a connected to a group that has been doing the same. And we talk all the time, and we look at this stuff all the time. What is going on is what is in control of our whole legal system is the Uniform Commercial Code. It is not common law, it's not the Constitution, it's Uniform Commercial Code. And by understanding that they're doing commerce, we're having life, we're living our life, we have our jobs, we pay our bills, we take care of our children, but all of the government entities that we're talking about are corporate structures, and they're doing commerce, Sean. And to them, we are a vessel, we are a commercial human resource. And it is up to us to make the distinction and to deny that and not consent and to challenge their authority. It is true. There are many people who have gone to jail, and there are many people who have not. It is very difficult to find a way to fight them in court. And we're kind of going along pretty fast. But you start going into their courts and things become pretty difficult. You have to have many, many, many years of experience. The best way to deal with their courts is to understand that they're a commercial enterprise and to not consent to go into the courts, to use strategies to deny their invitation into their corporate court. Mm-hmm. He took them on, Irwin Schiff, and bless his heart, he did a lot to advance information throughout our country. He was just amazing. He is one of the people that we've read and understand and respect. But when you go into their court to fight something, that is when you're in their jurisdiction and they make all the rules, basically. The private bar owns all the courts. I hope everybody gets that. The American Bar Association is a private organization. One of my consultants calls it the biggest secret society that's out in the open. Mm-hmm. And they control the courts, they control the judges, they control the bailiffs, listen to them. And this private enterprise called the bar, which originated from the Rothschilds banking cartel, controls our legal system. And it's all done for their benefit, right?
Right.
But, there are ways to do that. We put together a guide, a people's guide called Lawfully Yours. It's on the Anti-Corruption Society website. I have to recommend people take a read. We tried to do an introduction in the beginning of that to explain what's happened to our legal structure in our government, and then we moved forward with additional information, helping people understand how that affects you, the fact that it's just a corporate commercial enterprise, and putting out strategies that give you the opportunity to challenge it. Okay. But when it comes to the children in SB 277, we put up an article on Parents Against Mandatory Vaccines called Who Owns Our Children? And that really is the bottom line, Sean. Who owns your child? And we explain that when a mother and father come together and create with their own biological matter a zygote that grows into an infant that is born and becomes a child, it is truly their possession. It is their creation. They own it. I hope people understand that baby that you created is your property. And from the point in which you sign the birth certificate and register the child, that is where the presumption steps in that you registered that child and made it a asset of the state. Right. And that's the presumption that we'll be fighting all along.
Yeah, I'm nodding my head because I was going to ask you about the birth certificates. Now, how does that work? Because everybody is absolutely asleep to this fact. I mean, everybody has a birth certificate, and everyone who has a baby, certainly one of the first things they do is they make sure they get a birth certificate. How do you circumvent that? And what is the advantage to trying to circumvent that for new parents? Is the suggestion to not get a birth certificate? Can you even avoid getting one?
You're going to pay heck trying not to get out of that hospital without one. I have been quoted from people that the hospital gets anywhere from $2,000 to $10,000 per birth certificate. They actually get paid to do that, and they are not about to let you out without that birth certificate. But there's a wonderful book called "Fruit from a Poisonous Tree," written by attorney Melvin Stamper, where he talks about how they set up this birth certificate scam. And let me see if I can find it here. I did read part of this with Mike Williams, but it's so important because this is where the scam comes from. I'm sure, Sean, by now you know all of this goes back to the bankers, right?
Well, it does, and I was going to say, Anita, you hit the nail on the head there, because I've been saying for very long, at this point in human history, it's very clear that the war is not the United States versus Russia. It's not China versus Russia, or China versus the United States, or us versus Syria. It's humanity versus the banksters. And
Yep.
you absolutely hit the nail on the head. They print the money, the fiat, out of thin air, and they bought up all of the military-industrial complex and the Pentagon and the courts and the Rockefeller AMA, and, the hospitals and the medical science and the medical indoctrination and the vaccine. They own it all. So you're
Yes.
right. It is us. It's humanity versus the banksters.
That's exactly right. Okay, let me read this in the whole birth certificate thing. This draws this right into the bankers, okay, and how this was done and why. This is a quote from the book, Fruit from a Poisonous Tree, but he is quoting Edward Mandell House, who was an integral part of setting up the Federal Reserve, right? Mm-hmm. And this is from the private papers of Woodrow Wilson, who actually worked with House. And here's what House said. Very soon, every American will be required to register their biological property in a national system designed to keep track of the people, and that will operate under the ancient system of pledging. By such methodology, we can compel people to submit to our agenda, which will affect our security as a chargeback for our fiat paper currency. Every American will be forced to register or suffer not being able to work or earn a living. They will be our chattel, and we will hold the security interest over them forever by operation of the law merchant, which is what our courts are today, under the scheme of secured transactions. Americans, by unknowingly or unwittingly delivering their bills of lading, and that is the certificate of live birth, to us will be rendered bankrupt and insolvent, forever to remain economic slaves through taxation secured by their pledges. They will be stripped of their rights and given a commercial value designed to make us a profit, and they will be none the wiser, for not one man in a million could ever figure our plans out. And if by accident one or two figure them out, we have in our arsenal plausible deniability. After all, this is the only logical way to fund government, by floating liens and debt to the registrants in the form of benefits and privilege. This will inevitably reap to us huge profits beyond our wildest expectations and leave every American a contributor or to this fraud, which we will call social insurance. Without realizing it, every American will insure us for any loss we may occur, and in this manner, every American will unknowingly be our servant, however begrudgingly. The people will become helpless and without any hope for their redemption, and we will employ the high office of the president of our dummy corporation to foment this plot against America. Unquote.
Well, that's horrifying, and it actually makes my little slogan there about it's humanity versus the banksters sound trite, because that's a warfare strategy that you've just described, and it's demonic in its brilliance, in its scope. Aaron Russo warned us about it in his interview with Alex Jones, in which he was a friend of Nick Rockefeller's, and Nick Rockefeller told him that this was the plan, and ultimately they want to chip everybody, and they want all your banking information on a chip, so that if they don't like your politics, or they don't like you, or they have a problem with you, they'll just turn your chip off. They will shut you out of their New World Order economic system. And this slippery slope into endless global one world government tyranny is now happening so quickly that, I remarked to a friend today, Anita, that I feel like I'm throwing pebbles at Godzilla. I'm trying to cover it all at SGT Report, and I can't. It's all happening so fast now. And one of my friends who really, really focuses hard on Agenda 21 and is doing probably better work than anybody else on YouTube trying to cover it and slow it down in California is Grindal61, who I interviewed recently. And he literally is putting out information 2 videos a day. He's going to these city council meetings. He's watching the stakeholders have their needs met. As the public doesn't show up, or when the public does show up, their voice isn't heard. And it reminds me of what you were talking about with Mike Williams. Go to Dun and Bradstreet. You'll find out your city or your county or your school board is on Dun and Bradstreet. Can you tell us the significance of that? For those who don't know, what is Dun and Bradstreet, and why is that a significant fact?
Dun & Bradstreet is where all the corporations are listed in their credit ratings. And those who want to do business check out their credit ratings. It's like the credit rating, we have one for us, and Dun & Bradstreet is for all corporations. So they're all listed there. And just to give you, when I did my research initially in 2009, I just still kind of said, well, this, how... Sean, sometimes you say, well, this couldn't be. It couldn't be this big right in front of my face and me not know about it. That's one of the arrogance of us all that we have to overcome. How could this be true and me not know about it, right? I mean, there's a lot that's true that I didn't know about, right?
Right.
Okay, so I looked it up, my school board. I started with the school board because at the time they were setting up vaccination clinics in the schools, if you recall. And I was trying to convince them that it was a dangerous, bad idea. And they kept sending me this information and these responses, which were anything but friendly. So I looked up in the Ohio Revised Code, the school board. Now, the change in my state took place in 1953, where they brought the Uniform Commercial Code into my state. Some people said there were 18,000 statutes that were passed in 1 year. The UCC has been passed in every state throughout the country. By the middle of the 60s, it was a done deal, without any authority of the public, without any knowledge of the public. It was done by the bar without our knowledge or consent. But let me read to you what they did to my school board in 1953 when they did this. If you look at the Ohio Revised Code, now it's number 3313.17, corporate powers of the board. The Board of Education of each school district shall be a body politic and corporate, and as such capable of suing and being sued, contracting and being contracted with, acquiring, holding, possessing, and disposing of real and personal property, and taking and holding in trust for the use and benefit of such district any grant or device of land and any donation or bequest of money or other personal property, unquote. Effective date, October 1st, 1953. So they changed it to a corporate structure, and they gave it the authority to accept any grant without any knowledge of the public, which is what Agenda 21 you're going to find out, and if you haven't already discovered it, that's how the Agenda 21 policies are being bombed into our communities. It's through these corporate government grants, right? Mm-hmm. That's what's happening here in my community. I see it all the time. I've even looked up these grants. This is the corporation doing business. Mm-hmm. The feds from the executive level or the agency network create these grants with the Federal Reserve money, which is unlimited. Then they take these little grants and they offer them to your local city or county, and they say, here's the terms and conditions of this grant, sign this contract, and right on the front it says a grant contract. So we know they can all contract. So they sign the contract, they take the money, and then they proceed to implement whatever the terms and conditions of the grant are. All of this is done without the people who call that location home without our knowledge or consent.
Right, and even for those who are aware of what's going on and show up at the meetings, like Grindal 61 and his team that show up at these meetings every single day, every single week, and report on them, their voice is often not heard. And, you know,
Right.
as you noted in your interview with Mike, you said that's because they have absolutely no respect for us and don't have to explain themselves to us because they don't work for us. And I think that that's very poignant, and people need to understand that, because if these people on the school boards, if these people at city council are essentially part of a corporation, they're not really even personally liable to a lawsuit, are they? I mean, they've got the protection of the corporate structure. And you can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I mean, they're going to roll out these Agenda 21 policies like more bike lanes because they have a grant to do it. They're going to roll out high-density housing because they have a grant to do it. They have stakeholders that they represent through the corporation. They're going to roll out more ride-share lanes that nobody uses because they want to get people out of cars and they want to herd people into big cities and tiny little apartments. And I'm ranting here a little bit, but I wanted to ask you this before I forget. Have you seen the brainwashing and the propaganda now out there on FYI Network and HGTV? Let me just give you a list of the shows now, Anita, that are brainwashing people into glamorizing tiny little houses.
Oh, yes.
This is from FYI Network, Tiny House Nation, Tiny House Hunting, and then over at HGTV, which is a very popular network, Tiny House Hunters, Tiny House Big Living, Tiny House Builders, and these homes that they're glamorizing as the new wave in housing are approximately 200 to 300 square feet each. And they're selling it to the people now in TV programming. And guys, there's a reason why they call it programming, because they're programming you to accept it. I mean, I got to tell you, it's just, how do we beat this thing, Anita? I mean, at the end of the day, when it's so overwhelming and so far-reaching and so intimidating in its scope, how do we possibly defeat it? Because it seems like they're going to just steamroll us.
Well, here's been my kind of position, both philosophically and from my website and intellectually, is that I'm not in, is understanding what I control and what I don't. Mm-hmm. I'm not in control of the source of the money that's being thrown into all of these grants. That I have no control over that. In my community, we see evidence of exactly what you're talking about. At one point, I was trying to influence local government, and I attended regional planning commission meetings, and I saw at those meetings where they would announce to the attendees, who were what you might call stakeholders, what the grants available were and what they had to do to get the grants. So all of these municipalities send people to these regional planning commissions, and even if they don't, I looked on the website of many government, quote, entities, and I saw, well, here's a list of the grants that are available for this. If you start to do your research, like my county, I looked at that, and there's grants from the Justice Department and Homeland Security that county people can apply for. These grants are everywhere, and they apply for them. They meet the terms and conditions. Someone signs the contract, which is always interesting. If you follow Freedom of Information Act and you ask to see the grant, most of the players involved are not ashamed. They think this is just peachy keen. There's nothing wrong with this system. Then you can see who signed the grant and obligated that entity, be it county or public health or whatever, to the terms and conditions of that grant. That gives you an idea who the signatories are, in case you want to know. But once they sign that grant, if they don't satisfy the terms and conditions, they can be called upon to return the money. So this is way beyond our control, from what I can tell. You can go to the meetings, you can object. Chances are, in most cases, you go to the meetings and they've already switched them over so that you are a guest at their business meeting. And you know that if you go to enough, the individual you talk about it would probably agree with what I'm saying. If you go to enough meetings, you get the idea that you are a guest at their business meeting.
Right.
Because you are merely a guest that they've allowed to attend, they tell you you can speak for 2 to 3 minutes, and that's all.
Right. You know, it's interesting you'd say that because when I was getting my journalism degree in college, we would have to go to the city council meetings and we would have to do our ground-based reporting on that as part of our education, and they were so boring. And I always wondered, why do they run this like a corporate board meeting? Why is this run in a way that is so formal, painfully formal? Because if it was by and for the people representative government, it would be very much more conversational. Sure, it needs to have a structure, but they run it like a formality. And now I know why. It's because it's run like a corporation because it is a corporation. And it's frightening. And they couldn't be more boring meetings to attend. But as Grindal 61 has shown us, that's where you got to be if you want to stop this thing, or any chance of stopping it is stopping it at a grassroots ground level locally. That is where we have some powers locally, right? I mean, all power is exerted locally.
Well, now, for those who feel like they'd like to do that, we do. I have another website, and that the other website that I don't talk too much on air is about looking at my local community. I was big into going local for several years, and I still support the concept. Local businesses and, local entertainment, live local entertainment. I still believe economically and psychologically that is the best way for us all to live. But when I did my research and I looked at the government structures, the local government structures, I ran into exactly what we're talking about. And I did put them on my website. And I colluded with a bunch of other people who'd gone to these meetings. And so we put together a brochure, which I'll be happy to send you. And the brochure, you can certainly send it to your local government. And it basically outlines what's wrong with having a local government, which is a corporation. Why is that bad? They don't really know why it's bad because they're just they're having a good time. They got a good secure position. They get raises. They get perks and benefits. And they think of us as just numbers on their computers. But this brochure points out why we can't tolerate that and why they can't be making decisions and entering us into contracts without our knowledge or consent. They can't be giving themselves raises without our knowledge or consent. They cannot be exercising all kinds of programs, implementing programs that we don't approve of. They've got their own lawyers to defend them. They don't even have to pay for legal counsel.
Right.
In other words, they've designed a structure for themselves. Mm-hmm. And then they go on to believe that they can pass an ordinance, a local ordinance, and this is where Agenda 21 comes in. They can pass a local ordinance and inflict it on us. They have no problem. They truly believe they can do that. And this is where we have an opportunity to challenge them. This is when it comes to them saying, we've decided that you have to do this. And you mentioned that you were in a remodeling project. And
yeah, before our call started, I told you that I was trying to finish our basement. We've been working on this for a year. We built this house 10 years ago, trying to finish the basement. And I told you would be astounded. You probably won't even believe what I had to pay to get a permit, to have permission to finish our basement, which is not doing any remodeling or moving foundations or anything. It's just putting up the framing and putting up drywall, HVAC. Nothing major, nothing moving, right? Guess what they wanted for the permit?
I don't know.
$1,247.
Whoa!
Now, you and I hadn't had this conversation, so of course I thought, well, you know what? I have to pay it because if I go ahead and I finish this basement without the permit, when the city gets wind that I'm working on the basement, they'll come in, they'll do a forced inspection, and they'll make me rip everything down, right, and start over. Because once things are sheetrocked, you can't see the HVAC, you can't see the electrical, you can't, right? But I was astounded by that incredibly insane permit fee. Just the permit for permission to finish my own basement. Now, what should I have done, Anita? Is there a way around that?
Okay, here we go. Now that you're bringing us right into lawfully yours and what we're talking about, which is challenging their authority to force you to have a permit.
Now, is this the letter of inquiry that I've heard you talk about?
Yes, this is the letter of inquiry. Okay. They are going to tell you, you're going to ask them, what obligates me to get this permit? What did I sign? What contract did I sign? And you're going to do it politely and in writing. And what we're finding when people do this, they send them a letter. And they say, let me see if I can read it. Recently, I received a communication from your office regarding making application for a newly created permit. You cited a rule, code, or ordinance passed by the private corporation known as the City of Blue in your communications, but did not identify the statute by name, number, and effective date. The first thing you do is you get them to identify that they have such a statute, because they will tell you all kinds of things. So first, you want to know that it's actually real. Then you ask for a freedom of information request in this letter, and this again is in lawfully yours. And here's what we put in that, and people can word it in whatever way they choose, but this is what we put together. Please provide the name, number, and effective date of the rule, code, ordinance, and statute that prompted your communications. Please send me all documents that contain my original signature that created the obligation for me to adhere to that statute. Appreciatively. Now, once you know they're all corporations, it opens the door to other thinking, Sean, because now they're all corporations, and what do we know about corporations? They're bound by their charter and they're bound by the law of contracts, right?
They have to produce the contract, and the question
Correct.
is, can they?
Correct. Okay. They're bound by the laws of contract. They can't function with a handshake and a wink and a conversation. Everything they do is done on paper in contract. They're in commerce. They need contracts so that they can enforce contracts. So all you're doing is asking them for the contract that obligates you to that code. Now, generally when we've done this, and we've tried it with several people, and we get the same results every time, the first response is they quote the statute, the number, and the date, and they quote it. Like, okay, here it is. Here's God's words to you. And then you look at that and you go back, and now you're going to respond again. Thank you for responding. It was very interesting to read your statute, your code, your rule. Thank you for sending it to me. Okay, I'm still, however, in need of evidence of a contract that I've signed,
Right.
Obligating me to your corporation, and you name the city, the rules of that corporation.
Right.
Now they're really in trouble.
Right.
Because they don't have anything that obligates you to it.
Right. Is this the same approach one could take to get out of the onerous property taxes? Because I think people need to be really careful with this approach, depending on what it is that you're trying to rally against. Because, in the case of property taxes, they'll just seize your house.
Okay, we're working on that one right now, incidentally. And there's nothing in lawfully yours yet about property taxes. That's a different can of worms. And we've got a group of people locally who are working on that. And what they've discovered, which shouldn't surprise you, but what we're discovering is when we ask what the definition of property, they're coming back with several definitions of property, and all of them are commercial. What we are discovering is they feel they can charge you property tax because they're considering your home a commercial enterprise. So we're drafting letters now, and we're ready to go back and ask them, my house is not commercial enterprise. So what obligates me to this tax as I'm not involved in commerce?
Right.
When you interchange with these people, Sean, generally we recommend you start out with something saying this is not a refusal to cooperate or not a refusal to pay, to get them to understand that you're not refusing to cooperate. What you're doing is you're asking for more information.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I would just advise people to be very, very careful about how they approach these matters. Look at Anita's website, anticorruptionsociety.com. Google Lawfully Yours if you want to find the document she was referring to and reading. I think these approaches are very, very sensible and smart, and I think to assert our rights and our sovereignty as human beings and as free people in a republic, formerly a republic, we ought to take these steps. I just think people need to be very, very careful because, for instance, again, in the case of taxes, yes, it's a voluntary system. They have enforcement, and you might end up in prison. That's the problem, Anita. When you try to assert your personal rights and your sovereignty, your God-given constitutional rights in a land that no longer honors the Constitution, you may end up in jail. And,
Well, this is why we'd like to start with people, and most of what is on my website, and we're researching things a little more complex. But most of what's on my website is to figure out how it is you're unintentionally consenting and stop doing it. Mm-hmm. So much of what they're doing is based on our consent.
Right.
And we don't even know that we're consenting. So we're trying to get people to understand that there is a presumption that's going along with a lot that is going on. And the first thing we have to figure out is what is it that we're doing that they're interpreting as our consent. Mm-hmm. And step number one is figure out how you're consenting and find ways not to consent. That's like the very first thing we need to do. What is consenting and how do I stop? Mm-hmm. Because right now we're consenting, we're signing all these documents, and we have no idea that with all these documents that we sign, driver's license, all of these things, in their world, we're consenting to all the terms and conditions. Because remember, their world's commerce.
Right.
So the property taxes and the income taxes. Now, in lawful years, we've got nothing about the income taxes, Sean. Not that we don't respect some people who have succeeded in exiting the obligation of income tax. We do. We are really trying to help people on the bottom level. And there are a lot of people out there with strategies for not paying income tax. Trust me. And some of them are in jail.
Yeah, and but we do know that constitutionally, we know what's right. We know what is lawful and what's not lawful. I mean, Joe Bannister proved that, a former IRS agent. He took the IRS on. They tried to put him in prison, and he was exonerated, in a court of law by a jury of his peers because people know what is lawful and what's not lawful. The problem is that when you have a unlawful government that doesn't respect rule of law, that's the very definition of tyranny. And,
right, and that's absolutely right, and that's why in lawful years we have a section on what is a contract. And when people read that, it's tragic that we're not all educated on what is the basics of a contract. By the time you leave high school and you're 18 and old enough to put your name on a document that's a contract that obligates you to some performance, by the time you are 18, you should absolutely understand what a contract is. The Bar Association, every time people have attempted to move that kind of education into our schools, they have blocked it. Mm-hmm. They do not want the general population to understand the basics of contract law, which is, Sean, that's absolutely outrageous. Because we sign contracts every day, and yet we have no idea what are the basics of a contract. And so we decided it's time people know that. And once you understand that, then we can start challenging the fact that we haven't signed these contracts. Please show me the contract. Show me the contract.
Right. Yeah, it's very interesting, and it reminds me of how intimidating it is to, purchase a home or refinance a home. And then you go to the closing and you sign literally 30 documents. Nobody reads them. You'd have to have a law degree to be able to understand, the legalese of the way they're written anyway. And then we find out that Wall Street just, bought up all these and wrapped them into mortgage-backed securities. And so many of the deeds to homes are now just entirely missing. You may be paying a lender who no longer holds the title to your home. It's just a mess. And it's because the system is criminal, and it's because it is, at this point in human history, it's humanity versus the banksters. It's the banksters behind all of it. And,
all of it. Yep.
Yeah, and I just want to leave folks with this. You said in your interview with Mike, you said, you don't have a sovereign government. You have a for-profit corporation pretending to be a government, and they don't have our authority. They don't have our permission, end quote. And I think that's very powerful, and I think it's all about asserting rights. Now, of course, this criminal government wants to say anybody who asserts their rights is a domestic terrorist. You know, if you talk about these issues, sovereignty, personal sovereignty, the Constitution, Bill of Rights, you are a domestic terrorist and will be treated as such. It's a slippery slope into total tyranny, and I guess I'd leave folks with this, Anita.
Wait, can I add one thing, Sean?
Oh, yeah,
though?
please do.
The words that you just used, those are the words that they want us to use, because those are the words that the FBI is trained to think that a sovereign citizen is a terrorist. That's why we don't use those words, and you won't find those words, I don't think, in lawfully yours. We use the words that, well, we're happy to cooperate, just show me the contract. Mm-hmm. We're moving it away from this political diatribe that they control. Mm-hmm. We're moving our conversation into commerce, saying, show me the contract, show me the contract. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying I'm not going to cooperate. Show me the contract, show me the obligation. Mm-hmm. That is a whole different, you see how that's a whole different approach mm-hmm. to resisting this tyranny, is recognizing who they are. They're a corporation. Mm-hmm. And now we know that, we can ask for the contract.
I like that approach. It's very strategic and it's very smart. It's sort of getting into their realm and playing by their rules, knowing that so many of the underlings, the people, you know, directly that you'll be interfacing on the local level within this corporation, they don't know it's a corporation. They don't understand what we're talking about. So if you treat them respectfully and just say, not saying I'm not going to cooperate, but just show me the contract, you may actually get somewhere, because then they have to produce a contract which they can't produce. And I think it's a very, very smart strategy. And what I was going to say, actually, at the end of my little diatribe before, too, is that if they ever get the guns, if we ever allow them to take the Second Amendment, take our guns away from the people, then it's total tyranny, right? It's all bets are off, guys, and that's what they want. They want a disarmed public, because a disarmed public is a malleable public and a helpless public.
And here's the question. What obligates me to turn over my personal property to your corporation? Mm-hmm. And instead of quoting the Constitution, we go back to thinking and understanding we're dealing with a corporation. Okay, great. Now, what obligates me to turn over my personal property to your corporation? What did I sign again? Now, please send me a copy. Mm-hmm. This is what we're calling, and I didn't coin the phrase, but I love the phrase, a lawful rebellion.
I love it. No, I love it. It's great, because you can't demonize a lawful rebellion, because then you're demonizing the law. We know they don't respect the law, but how do you demonize, even with your Mockingbird mainstream media, a lawful rebellion? Let's recap your websites for people. I did not know that you had Parents Against Mandatory Vaccines. I love that. Check out that website, guys. anticorruptionsociety.com. And then do you do a weekly program on RBM, too, in Defense of Humanity? Tell us about that.
In Defense of Humanity, and we do it on Saturday nights, Eastern Time, RBN, 8 p.m., and we talk about a lot of these issues. We've covered this, and we'll cover it more for the people in California and others on how we can use strategies to protect our children from vaccination requirements, which many of us are very concerned are going to move rapidly into adult mandatory vaccines. We're all concerned about that. So we need to find a lawful way, okay? We need to find a lawful way to deny our consent and say we're not going to cooperate with that corporate regulation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love it. Do you guys upload your RBN weekly program in Defense of Humanity to YouTube, or can you start doing that? Because I'd love to post that at SGT Report. I could, but for those who are interested, RBN, if you go to RBN, actually on Lawfully Yours, on Anti-Corruption Society, there's a link that says IDH program links, and that's in Defense of Humanity program links. If you click on that, you'll see the name of the programs that we have. Oh, good.
What the subject matter was. We try to put links to the material we discussed on the show, and you'll see I've listed them. And then at the top, you'll see that you can go to the archives that RBN provides. And when you click on that, the new archives, you'll see you can pick the date of the program and click on it, and you can hear the conversation that took place regarding that topic.
Terrific.
And I'm glad you're interested in looking at this contract mess, Sean, because I think there might be solutions in there that people haven't had a chance to look at yet.
Yeah, and you just woke up in 2009. That's right around the time I woke up, and to the extent that I started a YouTube channel and a website, it was waking up in 2006 to the 9/11 false flag. And the point here is that, as Grindal 61 has shown us, as Sophia Smallstorm has shown us, as Mike Williams has shown us, every individual can make a difference. So for those of you who are listening to this broadcast, please know that you do have power and you can make a difference. Get into this fight with us. We'll post your material at SGT Report. Learn everything you can learn from Anita's site, Anti-Corruption Society, and jump in the fight. It is a battle for humanity, and I love the name of your program, In Defense of Humanity. Hey, before we let you go, I just want to thank Sophia Smallstorm for getting me in touch with you, because I really enjoyed this conversation. I also enjoyed Mike Williams' conversation with you, and the name of his show is Sage of Quay Radio. And most of all, Anita, I want to thank you for your time and all that you're doing.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it, and I hope it's helpful to people.
Yeah, and me too, and I think it will be. And guys, leave us your comments below. Anita, please keep your eyes out for the comments on YouTube. People really do leave a lot of great comments and suggestions and may have questions for you. I'll let you know when this is posted. And guys, I want to thank each and every one of you for taking action and for tuning in. We appreciate your support at sgtreport.com, at thephaser.com, and at thelibertymill.com. Real news 24/7. And check out anticorruptionsociety.com. Thanks, Anita.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend ahead, guys. Bye-bye.